All right, everyone, good evening. If you could take your seats, please. Welcome to our Midtown Ventura Community Council meeting for July 11, 2019. We usually go around and have people introduce themselves, but I think with a pretty full agenda we have tonight, we're going to pass on that. I had all my notes on my agenda, and I think I left it at home. Well, I know I left it at home, so I'm going to wing it, but I think I've got it here. So if you would please sign in before you leave tonight, and if you don't get our email newsletter, if you would also sign your name clearly, there's some sheets back there for that, so we can actually read it, and we'll add you and you'll get our email newsletter if you don't already receive it. I do want to thank our hosts, Grace Church, who've been our hosts here and giving us this nice room to use, and they've improved it over the last couple of years, and really appreciate them allowing us to be here so often. First up tonight, we do have a special recognition for a very close friend of all of ours, I think, at least that have been on this project a few years back. Marlene McMullen had been the principal at Loma Vista School for quite a few years and is now going to Lincoln Elementary School. And she's been the caretaker to make sure once the Midtown put in that garden with Surf Rider and other folks, a lot of different helpers, she's been making sure in the last several years that it's kept thriving. And it looks great. If you haven't gone over and seen Loma Vista School, it's a California native garden, and it's beautiful. So it's right in the front of the office and on the side of the office in the auditorium. So if I could ask Marlene to come up, please, and Pamela. So we just wanted to acknowledge all that you've done. And Pamela came up with a great idea of something that you could take with you. So.
I have it upside down. Oh, that is so cool. Thank you so much.
Something you can take with you, not just a plaque, but pictures of the kids in the garden and show it to them. Do you want to say something? If you would like to say something, speak here.
Sure. I just want to thank everybody. That was a big undertaking that Midtown took care of for us. It was the whole front of the school. And so it's an absolutely beautiful native garden. We had a lot of rain this year, so wow, if you haven't seen it, stop by. It's absolutely beautiful, incredible, a very large native garden. So it's been my pleasure to work with everybody to take care of the garden, and we'll continue the work. I know there's still work to be done, weeds like crazy right now, but we'll go over there and take care of that. But thank you so much for all of your efforts, and it has been wonderful because it didn't end there. It wasn't like the garden was put in and good luck, see ya. It's been a lot of a labor of love for a long time for us, and it's just spectacular. So the kids get to enjoy it and work in it and learn about it. So thank you so much for all that you've done. So we'll continue. Yeah, thank you.
And like I said, she's going to Lincoln School, so I'll see even more of her because Lincoln's been my adopted school for years and years. So and I'm really happy that you're going to Lincoln. Next up, we have a spotlight on nonprofits and volunteers. And I got to get his name right. It's Joey Uhas Lukomski. Did I get it? He said I got it. Okay. Of Bike Ventura. And he's going to get like 5 minutes to explain, and we do this every month, 5 minutes to explain about his organization, and then we'll have 5 minutes for questions. We kind of keep to that. It's kind of a long elevator speech, basically, but it's good to get the word out there on different organizations right at the front of our meeting. So come on up, Joey.
All right. Hi, I'm Joey Uhas Lukomski. Very good. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I got to say, Midtown, one of my favorite neighborhoods to ride a bike through in Ventura. So, quick elevator pitch. We're going all the way to the top floor. A little bit about myself first. I'm originally from the East Coast, right outside of Washington, D.C. I've been riding a bike for a long time, my whole life, basically. And I moved to California, to Santa Barbara a few years ago, and I worked for the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition for about 4 years there. And then I left that job, and then I got hired on as executive director of Bike Ventura in Ventura. And my first day was December 5th, 2017. So some of you may, right, yeah. So, and I was still living in Santa Barbara at the time, and it was definitely wild for everybody I know, but as an organization, we really came through. We have our location on the avenue where we have our office and our do-it-yourself bike shop. But what we were able to do was get together and rally the community and build 200 bicycles that Giant had donated and give those to people that had lost their homes in the Thomas Fire. So, and that was January 2018. So within 2 months of moving to Ventura, I saw this community just come together. We had over 50 volunteers helping us build these bikes. The people that came out were incredibly grateful and just awesome, and I was blown away. I was like, okay, I'm definitely sticking around for at least a little while. So I really love it here, even though I'm not from here, and I'm happy to be doing the work that we're doing, which is, we, of course, have the Ventura Bike Hub, which is our do-it-yourself bike shop on the avenue. It's where has anyone been there before? Show of hands, maybe? Cool, awesome. So that's where we teach people how to fix their bicycles themselves. So if someone comes in and they've got like a flat tire or something, and they say, hey, can you fix this for me? No, but we've got the tools, we've got a place you can put your bike up, and we're gonna show you how to fix the bike yourself. It's only $5 an hour, and we've helped people fix their bikes with all sorts of problems. So that's really cool. Also, that would not be able to do what it does without the support of volunteers. We've got a very small staff, but we've got at least 2 or 3 volunteers in there helping us with bikes every day that we're open. So it's really incredible. Another thing we do is bike education for youth and adults. We've been doing a lot of bike education with youth recently, and one thing that was cool, you may have seen at Cabrillo, we were helping teach 6th graders in PE class bike safety and bike riding. So what we did was the city got a fleet of bikes thanks to a grant from the Channel Islands Bicycle Club, and they had a fleet that kids could get on and they could ride around. And then every Friday for 3 weeks, we took them on a ride around the neighborhood. So you may have seen us riding around here. And so one thing that I hear a lot of people saying as I get to know more and more people that live in Ventura is they say, wow, when I was a kid, we all would ride our bikes to school, to meet up with friends, wherever. And then they say, well, why are all the bike racks empty at all the schools? And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. People don't feel safe doing it, distracted driving is on the rise, and stuff like that. So I think it's really great that we're teaching these kids these safe riding skills, but Bike Ventura also, we're an advocacy organization too, and we are trying to get more safe bike infrastructure built for youth and adults to ride on the street. And hopefully we can get more kids riding to school, more adults riding. That means less cars on the road. So you probably feel the impact every school day when people are picking up or dropping off their kids at the high school, at Cabrillo here, right? Long lines of cars. So the more kids we can get riding their bikes to school, the less of an impact that'll have on the neighborhood, we hope. So we also like to have a lot of fun, and we just did a really cool 4th of July community bike ride. We rallied a bunch of people, rode from Foster Bark to the 4th of July street fair, and we're also a resource for all of you. If anyone thinks that they have a cool idea that involves biking, you know, we've got a space, we've got bikes, let me know, and we can do something cool. And finally, I'll encourage everyone to just sign up for our newsletter, bikeventura.org. It's an email every month. It's just, hey, here's what's going on. Maybe there's a public meeting where some sort of bike infrastructure is being discussed. Maybe there's a cool class you might be interested in taking, or maybe there's just a fun bike ride going on around town. So I think that's about it. Was that 5 minutes? Yeah, you did great. Wonderful.
If there's anybody with any questions.
Okay, yeah. Yes, there is. Actually, we've got a pretty cool class coming up on the 20th, and this is called Ride Ready. And basically, it's for people that ride their bikes around town or want to get into biking to get from point A to point B in the city a little bit more, but don't feel comfortable sharing the road with cars. So what we do is we talk about bike safety. So even little things like finding a bike that fits you, what to take with you every time you ride. We teach you how to fix a flat tire. And then we go into more of the sharing the road with cars, right? Because that's what makes everybody the most nervous. How to navigate making a left turn at an intersection, and stuff like that. And then we actually go out, we teach you some emergency maneuvers, and then we go on a ride around the neighborhood from our shop on the avenue just to kind of bring it all together. It's a really cool class, it's free, and everyone that takes it gets a patch kit and a set of tire levers just to get your little repair kit started. So, any more questions?
Hold on, I gotta.
Oh, okay, cool.
Gotta use the mic. Hold it. I feel like we're in a press conference here. So,
Quick question, do you, I'm sorry, where's that? It's on. Do you accept donations of used bikes or older, like, kids' bikes? I've got a couple that I think I need to get out of the house.
That is a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. So a lot of how we support ourselves, the answer is yes. Okay. So the shop supports this low-cost repair program by selling bikes that people donate to us, refurbishing and selling them at a low cost, or if someone donates kids' bikes, we have a lot of youth programming where kids will earn a free bike by participating in a week-long course where they're not just riding, but learning proper helmet fit and all this the safe riding skills that we teach adults as well. So, yeah. Oh, okay.
How about like a used jersey? Gently.
Anything bike related, yeah.
Okay.
You can drop it off. Since we're a nonprofit, we're able to issue a tax deductible receipt if you'd like one. And all that stuff is great for people that maybe they don't want to spend $150 on a brand new jersey. They're just thinking about getting into riding, you know, for fitness or something like that. So all that stuff is really helpful and appreciated.
Great.
And one more time, just that website was bikeventura.org. And I'm Joey Ozakumsky. You can email me anytime with any thoughts you have about biking or anything, I guess. Joey@bikeventura.org.
thank you very much, Joey.
No, thank you all.
I need both of these. All right, next up, we have our Ventura Police Chief, Ken Corney, and he's going to talk about the 3-year strategic plan. And I really wanted just to have him have the opportunity to, after that, to talk whatever he wanted to talk about. He's got a wealth of experience.
We'll see.
And I'm sure you've got a lot of things to tell us.
I'm going to pull the mic off here, and fortunately, you're not going to hear from me today. You're going to hear from Assistant Chief Darren Schindler as well. We've got Commander Derek Brunk, who's tonight's watch commander here too, and he has good information on some of our current crime stuff if there's questions, and if we need anything really high reach pulled down from a shelf, Derek's our go-to guy for that. So, hey, Joey, we get a lot of bikes in the police department. You know, we have a deal with a company that collects, you know, property. We don't do auctions anymore, and in return they give us our property booking system. But I think we can salvage through bikes. So we ought to hook up, because every month they come by, I bet we have more bikes in our shed sometimes than you do. And it's, you know, we try and get people to register their bikes and help us recover them, but most of the bikes we get, they'd be good for parts. I don't think there's a lot of really high-end bikes that we recover. We never see those, but it's a good opportunity did you take parts? I think we got a lot of parts. So hello, great to be here and see y'all, and I think it's great. We honor our schools, which are so key to a community, and then you know, an important nonprofit, and it's great that you do that, and you know, it just connects our whole community. Tonight we're going to talk about actually this is the first presentation we've done on our strategic plan to any community groups, and it really just began with the fiscal year in July. I've been at the department 33 years, and I can't think of a time where we didn't have some kind of work plan or strategic plan that we went by. So in my tenure as chief, I've continued that as I was part of it in other times in my career at different ranks, and I think it's really important. And you know, it's important because, you know, we go to 100,000 calls a year, make 6,500 arrests, take 18,000 reports, and we're busy and we're running around, and we can do that all day. And really, at the end of the year, all we have to show is what we've done. We haven't advanced things. We haven't tried to make things better. We haven't done any problem solving. We haven't tried to be more effective, more efficient. So I think it's important. You've got to set some goals. And one of the best analogies I've heard about strategic planning, well, there's a couple of them, and the great Wayne Gretzky, the hockey player, you know, prolific goal scorer, they asked him how he was so good, and he goes, well, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where I think the puck's going to go. And it's kind of, you know, in strategic planning ways, you have to kind of design and move your organization where you think the future's needs are going to be, not where it is today. Secondly is another great story is Alice in Wonderland, the fable, right? So Alice falls in the looking glass, and she's, you know, walking down the road, and she comes to Derek and Darren have heard the story 100 times. They come to 101 times now. She comes to a fork in the road, right? She doesn't know which way to go, and she looks up, and there's that Cheshire cat grinning down on her, right? And the cat looks at her and says hello, and she said, well, can you help me? I'm lost. I don't know which way to go. And the Cheshire cat said, well, it all depends on where you're trying to get. And she said, well, I don't know where I'm trying to get. And he said, well, then either way will do. And if you don't plan, you end up somewhere, but it's nowhere you plan to be, and it may not be the best place to be. So we've worked each period of time, and our strategic plan is really more like a work plan of where we think we need to be in the future. We've had a tremendous change in California in laws based on legislative changes, voter initiatives, case decisions, on things that change the way we have to police, body-worn video, things like that, things that have happened in the profession. So how do we align all that to really move forward successfully? How many of you watch police shows? Any police shows? Like, what's a Blue Bloods? What are some of the popular shows now? Cops, yeah. Blue Bloods. My mom watches that one, and I think she just stares at Tom Selleck, but I'm a big disappointment as a chief because I don't look like Tom Selleck. But to my mom, so do you remember the episode on strategic planning? Not the stuff they put on TV, is it? But it's important for an organization to set a goals and to have a plan for how they're going to measure their advancement towards that goal and to move forward. How we went about our developing our plan this year was 6-8 months ago. We started talking about it and realizing, okay, the new fiscal year's coming up. We've got to start. It'll be the expiration of our current 3-year work strategic plan, and so we began to talk about it individually. Then we went through the organization and talked to every team. And got their input, and then we had a series of community meetings where we invited members of the community to come to 2 meetings, one at City Hall, one at the police department, presented to them what we were thinking and some of the challenges we have and the opportunities we think exist. And then we did a community survey. Anybody get that online? We sent it out through Nextdoor. We got like over 500 responses and like 200 and something comments, and we've responded to every one of those comments by now. And if you didn't, let me know, because they told me we've responded to them all. No, I know we have, and so it helped us frame where we think we needed to be and what our community expectations were going to be. So we're going to move forward, and what we're presenting tonight is really the plan that's not quite published yet. We've got some graphics to do. Each year, we're going to insert in the presentation the plan where we're at with the measures and the results so far. And the plan basically has the goals, and we're going to present the goals. There's 5 goals. We'll be presenting those measures, performance measures of those goals. And those are things that help us tell if we're advancing towards the success of that goal. For instance, crime control. So what do we use to say how we're doing with controlling crime? And Assistant Chief Schindler is going to present those in a moment. Then we have strategies that influence those measures, right? So what are we going to do, action plans to influence the measures? Now, we come up and we think about what might help now, and we do a pretty good job of identifying things, but those things can change. So the strategies are flexible. The measures don't change through the period of the plan, nor does the goal. And so those are kind of solid and principle based, but you can change the strategies and influence them. Times change, things change, and you may get a better idea. So that's kind of how we're going to go through it. Any thoughts or questions? I'm going to turn the microphone over to Assistant Chief Schindler, who's going to talk about the first two goals.
Thanks, Chief. So I was going to start off with a pop quiz, but the chief gave away all the answers. That's okay. He mentioned the number of arrests that we make each year. So last year we made over 6,500 arrests, and that's 6,500 people, not charges. Many of those people have multiple charges. Reports, we took over about 18,000 police reports. That includes crime reports, accident reports. Okay, can you hear me better? Okay. And who can guess how many calls for service we responded to? He mentioned it, but I don't know if you caught it. 99,000. 99,000 calls for service. That does include what the officers run into while they're out patrolling, so not necessarily somebody calling on 911, but if they roll up on something and someone flags them down and says, hey, something happened, we count that as a call for service as well. So 99,000, and we currently our sworn staffing is 139 officers. And of those 139, how many do you think work patrol? 9? No. About 65 at any one time are assigned to patrol, and the other 75 or so are assigned to investigations, ancillary, motor officers, staff members, etc., school officers. So that's 99,000 calls for service by almost 65, 70 officers for the most part. All right, so the chief mentioned crime control. Crime control is our first measure of 5 measures. And we talk about crime control. There's a couple things I need to explain to you. One of the measures you're going to see, it talks about Part 1 crimes. Then the Department of Justice defines Part 1 crimes for all the police agencies in the state of California, as well as the whole United States, as 8 crimes. They're all crimes that involve victims, and you'll be familiar with them. They're the big ones. They're the homicides, the rapes, robberies, aggravated assaults, burglaries, larcenies or thefts, stolen vehicles, and arsons. Those are the 8 crimes that make up Part 1 crimes. There's a lot of other crimes, Part 2 crimes, which are usually misdemeanor crimes, misdemeanor battery, trespassing, drug crimes are now misdemeanor crimes for the most part. Those fall into Part 2 crimes. What we're talking about here with a measure is Part 1 crimes across the United States. So our first goal doesn't have anything to do with Part 1 crimes, but it is to arrive to crimes in progress and emergency calls within 5 minutes. So what that means is when someone calls 911, from the time the dispatcher picks up the phone, starts taking the information, we want to have an officer on that scene within 5 minutes. And those would typically be injury at traffic accidents, a felony crime in progress, something where there might be somebody in danger, that kind of a thing. Burglary in progress, someone comes home, sees their window open, maybe someone just ran out in the backyard. That's a crime in progress that would warrant an emergency response. Those are the calls that you're going to see the officers responding to with their lights and siren on. The second one is what I mentioned about Part 1 crimes, and we want to achieve a crime clearance rate that is better than national average. So what that means is if we have 5 crimes, the crime clearance rate is how many of those crimes do we solve? In Ventura, we do pretty good with this, and I have some numbers for you for the national average. And you'll see that we want to be better than the national average. We don't always achieve that, but that's our goal. So some of the more common things that you experience here in Ventura are property crimes. Those are burglaries and thefts. Stolen vehicles is one of the more popular crimes. We do have robberies. We do have violent crimes. We do have usually a couple homicides a year. So the national average for solving homicides is, anybody want to take a number? Guess? A little higher. 59. A lot higher, sorry. So for 2018, the city of Ventura, we had 2 homicides, and we solved them both. So that was 100% clearance rate. Now, we're lucky in that we're not in a big city like LA or Chicago where they actually have hundreds and hundreds of homicides. But what we do have a lot of are thefts. And about 1/3 of those thefts are actually shoplifts. So we call them larcenies. The national average for larcenies that get solved is 20%. So 1 in 5 larcenies get solved. In Ventura, for 2018, we were just under 20%. We were 19.31%. So we're doing okay. When you take in all of these crimes together and you look at what's called, you see on the bottom there, the Part 1 per capita crime rate. Sounds complicated, but what it basically is the number of Part 1 crimes divided by your population, by the city's population. So, for example, Ventura, for the last couple of years, has been in the high 30s. So what that means is for every 1,000 residents, approximately 37, 38 people are going to be victimized by one of these Part 1 crimes, okay? So you see that our last goal is to achieve a reduction in our Part 1 crimes compared to the previous year. Now I'm happy to say I have looked going back 3 years, and for each of the last 3 years, we've actually gone down by about 1 to 2% each year. So for example, 2018, we had a total of 3,960 Part 1 crimes. The year before, 2017, we had 4,114. So we actually reduced by almost 4%. And that remains consistent for the last several years. So we're on a good trend of going down. To the right of that, you see our strategies, and these are just some of the things that we think will help us achieve the 3 goals that you see on the left. Habitual offenders, those are the people that we run into more than we'd like to. So have you ever heard that 10% of the population commits about 90% of the crimes? It's pretty accurate. So we have a list of chronic offenders, and these are people that we run into, and typically it's quality life crimes. It might be thefts, it might be drugs, it might be drunk in public. And what we do is we try to get them in programs. We work with them, assistance-based enforcement. We have a patrol task force that deals a lot with them. It's a lot of the homeless population, but a lot of it is also people that get out of jail and reoffend. So those people take up a lot of our time. We're trying to focus on those people. Deploy focus area patrols based on intelligence and real-time crime trends. So what we do is, on a weekly basis, we look at the crime trends across the city and we see where's crime occurring. And we'll usually see some patterns. There usually is an area. Maybe it's the parking lot of a shopping center where they're having cars broken into. Maybe it's a park where we're getting calls that there's drug dealing and vandalism is going on. So what we do on a weekly basis with our crime analysts is we identify those areas, we send that information out to our patrol officers, and we ask them to not only patrol those areas, but to spend about 10 or 15 minutes every couple hours in those areas when they have time. And it could be as simple as getting out of the car and walking through the park for 15 minutes, letting people see them. If they have a lot of reports to do, we ask them, go park your car there and do some reports. Be seen. Reduce the time calls penned before being dispatched. So this goes directly to the first measure, which is to arrive on scene within 5 minutes. What we ask our dispatchers to do, this will correlate with the next one, is when they answer the phone and they type the call in, we want to get that call out to the officers as fast as we can. If all the officers are tied up on different calls and it's an emergency call, we ask them, find the officers who are not on emergency calls and clear them off those calls and send them to the emergency so the call doesn't wait, okay? And then the fourth bullet point right behind that goes along with that. We have a new CAD system, which is our computer-aided dispatch, and it ties directly into our reports, the officers' computers in the cars, and when they write a report, it goes directly into the system. There's not a paper system anymore. So we're transitioning to that right now, and we really feel that that's going to help us achieve that goal of getting the calls faster and getting the information out faster. We want to expand our forensic examination and crime scene processing capabilities. 5 years ago, we had one detective. He was a sworn officer, and he did all of our CSI. Everybody knows what CSI is, right? It's all over the TV. That's the trend, actually. People are wanting to get into that profession now. We came up with a idea. We can have 2 non-sworn people for the cost of 1 sworn person doing that job, and we did that. So about a year and a half ago, we were fully implemented with 2 non-sworn. They're doing awesome. We're getting out to scenes. We're doing fingerprints a lot better. We're submitting cases to the crime lab, Ventura County Crime Lab, to help us analyze it a lot faster, and it's really paying off. And what we're looking to do is identify people through other means besides witnesses, fingerprints, DNA, et cetera. Utilize crime or criminal investigative technicians to enhance our efficiencies. Again, we thought about how can we get officers to calls with the limited number of resources we have. Well, maybe some of the calls we don't have to use police officers with a gun and a badge. Maybe we can use some civilian employees that wear similar uniform, different color shirt, and they can respond to some of these calls. These are the cold calls. These are the calls where someone came home and someone vandalized their car, or maybe somebody broke into their house and stole something. But there's no suspects there, and there's no suspect information. In the past, we would send an officer, just like me, just like any patrol officer, to handle that, and he'd typically be off the street for an hour or so, taking that report and processing the scene. Now what we're doing is we're transitioning to these civilian employees. Again, it's much cheaper, and it leaves the sworn officers available on the street to respond to the calls that they need to be at.
I have a question. So is that the volunteers that are doing that in the white, or is that another?
Separate. So we also have volunteers. You've probably seen the volunteers in policing driving around in the vans. We have a volunteer program, a great program. We'll talk about it actually later in the PowerPoint, but this is actually something we started this year. We have 2. We're hiring 2 more, so we're going to have a total of 4. And the idea is to supplement the officers. We're not reducing our officer staff. This is going to be in addition to the officers that are out there, so that when the officers get a call of a subject disturbing, maybe he's drunk and he's in a yogurt shop and he's bothering the female cashier, we're not going to have to wait to send an officer to that. We're going to have the civilian employee who can handle that burglary call or that vandalism call, handle that, so our officers are free to handle the more urgent calls. Expand our technology-based systems to improve investigative outcomes. Long story short, I talked about our CAD, our computer-aided dispatch. We also have some new software. All of our officers are issued iPhones. On their iPhones, we are connected with the Ventura County Jail, who actually made an app. Our officers, when they stop somebody, they can put the person's name in there and their birth date, and if they've ever been arrested, it'll actually pop up with their picture, all their tattoos, pretty much any arrest that they've had in Ventura County. Saves them a lot of time trying to identify people in the field. The next step with that is portable fingerprint devices, which we're rolling out pretty soon too. The county's actually doing that with us. Increase our crime prevention messaging across social media platforms. Does anybody follow social media? If you do, you have to know we have really active social media. Ashley Bautista is our community outreach coordinator. She's awesome. In the last couple years, it's great. It's great for us. We get a lot of feedback from the community, and it's also great for the community to see what we're doing. And last but not least, to enhance our crime analysis capabilities. So our crime analysis, as I talked about before, does the identifying of hot spots, those areas where I said we're having trends. We're working with a vendor, the same vendor that we use for our computer-aided dispatch, to integrate software that will kind of help them in a more efficient way get that information not only on a paper form, but out to the computers in the car, so the officers working might get an update that day while they're working. Hey, here's what's going on. This is what happened in your neighborhood last night. They can look at it, and they can go to that area when they have free time. So that's not all we do for crime control, but that's the majority of what we think we're focusing on. That's the direction we're moving on as far as our strategies and our measures. And we call them measures because they're really goals, but they're measures because we can actually measure them. Instead of at the end of 3 years saying, did we accomplish it, yes or no, we'd rather be able to say, well, we were successful 75% of the time, and here's how we can get to 80 or 90%. That's why we call them measures. And as command staff, the chief, myself, and all of our commanders, we meet on a weekly basis. We go over the stats, and we talk about how can we improve on a week-to-week basis. Any questions on crime control before I talk about team development? Yes, ma'am.
taping or recording, I should say.
I was just going to say, I did not hear what the last one on the first major crime was. Yeah, part one.
Oh, the list of murder. The first one was murder, homicide.
The 10th one.
That's the first one. The last one, or the 8th one, was arson.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you.
We're lucky we don't have a lot of homicides, and we don't have a whole lot of arsons either. Any other question? I'll move on to team development. Okay.
Yeah, we do have one more.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. There's a number of people in town who either ride motorcycles or very badly maintained cars, and they love running up and down Main Street, revving their engines so loud that it's ear-splitting.
Right.
And they do it on purpose. If they see somebody go like this, they'll come and do it again.
Yeah.
And I've seen them go down one end and come back.
Correct.
Are they stopped if the police see that? Do they stop them and give them a ticket?
Yes, so if there's a police officer and he witnesses it, by all means, there is a vehicle code section that talks about loud exhaust. It's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. And I'll tell you, I used to work on the motorcycle. I used to be a motor officer. Every time we stop somebody, to them it's a safety issue. They say, the reason my exhaust is so loud is I want people to hear me coming, because most of the time they don't see me coming.
That's
I'm just telling you what they say, right? So my response was, well, my police motorcycle is not loud like that, and I don't have that problem. So we get complaints on that all the time, and we do stress to our officers, our patrol officers, as well as our motor unit, to enforce it and to take action whenever they do see it. And occasionally our motor unit will actually go out to areas where there's complaints. Main Street's the typical one, downtown especially, and they'll actually sit there and look for it.
I think they try and set off the alarms too.
The car alarms, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I was just wondering on the civilian officers that go out to, like you said, the vandalism and stuff, what kind of training is that? Are they doing for that? Is it an officer that's...
Yeah, so
Does that make sense?
our first two just started, and it's good timing. We're actually, this week, we started their training. So what they do is very similar to what our police officers do. They go out with what's called a field training officer. It's a sworn police officer. They'll ride with them, and they'll show them how to handle these calls. So for example, I'll give you a burglary. Somebody's house was broken into. They'll get dispatched to the burglary. Not only will the officer show them what to look for, how to take the report, but they'll also show them how to dust for fingerprints and do some of the minor processing, crime scene processing. If it's an extensive crime scene, they will call our CSI unit out to handle that. The second component of that is, as we get them trained with learning how to take reports and what to look for, we're going to actually have them in the investigation unit helping our detectives. And when they do that, they'll receive training from our detectives.
So I believe crime rates have been going down both in Ventura and just generally. What do you attribute that to, and what can you learn from that to keep going?
Well, the police department's going to take all the credit for that. There's a lot of things. One is, I think, some of the strategies that we've put into place. I talked about our focus patrols, our hotspots policing, which is trying to develop and observe patterns sooner. And when we do, deploy our resources to those. One idea is, yeah, it does, but then they move to another spot. If you have a problem in a particular park and then all of a sudden officers are showing up there, doing reports there, talking to people, what's going to happen? They're going to leave, but they're likely to go somewhere else. So that's why we do this process every week, because it might be a hot spot or it might be a problem this week, but it migrates. So the key for us is staying on it and not letting them get too stationary. Secondly, I think public education, our social media has a lot to do with it. We put out a lot. I talked about Ashley Bautista and the work she's doing. We put out a lot of crime tips. We put out a lot of information about scams. You've probably seen some of that, either phone calls you got or something in the mail about scams that go around. So it's about informing the public and working with the public on these issues. The citizen, we can't do our job without you. And the more comfortable you feel with us, the more transparent you feel with us, the more likely you are going to call us when you see something suspicious. And we want to make sure that you don't feel like you're bothering us. We want you to call us, because it's always the neighbor who just doesn't feel right about something in the neighborhood that knows the best. So that's just a couple of things that I would contribute it to.
I was just thinking, I do that myself. If I see something that doesn't feel right, I call, and I
Yeah.
do that often. And what you were talking about earlier, when I tell neighbors all the time, I don't want to call. No, it's so they can map it, so they know if there's crime going on. And
Yes. We've had countless times where we've gone out to something, maybe someone's house is broken into, and the neighbor comes out and says, I saw some people, and I just didn't want to bother you. Please, by all means, call us. It's not a bother. That's what we are there for. We'd rather be called than it's nothing. We'd rather be prepared for something that doesn't happen than not know and something does happen. I'm not taking too much time up, am I, Dan?
well, we probably ought to get, after this question,
Okay.
get going again.
Hi, I was wondering if we get people using more of our public spaces, like if there's more people using the promenade, all segments of the population, or more segments of the population using our parks, do you think that helps reduce crime versus like an empty park?
Yes.
Eyes on the street? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. People that are up to no good, they don't want other people seeing them. They don't want to be around the other people. A populated area, like the promenade, like a park, people enjoying themselves, taking runs, going for walks, serves two purposes. One, it's uncomfortable for the person who's there for nefarious activity, but two, it's more eyes to notice and call us or say something when someone is doing something. Yes. Okay, I'm going to cover team development, and then the chief's going to talk about the last three goals. And team development is, we call it a focus on our most important resources, and that's our people. That's our employees. That's the citizens. It's everybody that's a stakeholder in the city of Ventura, which is everybody. We, over the last few years, have experienced a shortage of people wanting to get into law enforcement. The community sentiment in Ventura has been pretty good compared to across the United States, but as you see on the news, there's a lot of sentiment anti-law enforcement. Things have changed a bit, so we're struggling a little bit to get qualified applicants. It's actually starting to turn. We've made some strides in that, but one of the areas where we've fallen short over the last couple of years, and we're starting to catch up, is our dispatchers. So one of our goals is to increase our sworn, those are the police officers, and our dispatchers, the applicant pool by 10%. California has an organization called POST. It's the Police Officers Standards and Training. They regulate police officers training. They regulate the initial training officers go through the police academy, and then all of the ongoing professional training that goes on during their career. Our second measure is we want to have 100% compliance with POST requirements. And what that means is, for example, every police officer has to go through 24 hours of additional training every 2 years while they're employed as a police officer. Well, as you can understand, busy schedules, demands on our resources, sometimes it's difficult for us to get all 139 officers to 24 hours of training every 2 years. Our goal is to get 100% of them to training, and we actually do very, very well with that. We want to maintain a department-wide staffing level no more than 10% below our authorized positions. So if we have 139 authorized, we don't want to have more than 10% out for any one reason. That could be people retiring, it could be officers that are out injured, it could be an officer who maybe moves and goes to another police department. So we're trying to stay up on our hiring numbers, because every time we fall short, it directly affects our resources in the field and affects all the other goals that we have. And then lastly, we want to incorporate mental health resiliency into our wellness program. Ventura, the city of Ventura has, I'm happy and proud to say this, probably one of the best wellness programs in Southern California. Our patrol officers work 13-hour shifts, and for the first hour of their shift, they work out at the police department, shower, and go to briefing on duty. And what we've seen is officers in better shape, not only physically but mentally. They work out as a team. It builds camaraderie with that team. Usually a patrol team is about 10 officers. And then we see when they do get hurt, they seem to come back faster. They seem to recover from their injuries faster. This component is talking about a mental health wellness component. This is about a check-in, and it's something that is very new. We're looking at having a mental health check-in for all of our sworn officers as well as our professional staff. So once a year, they can go more than that, but once a year, we would ask them to have a conversation with the department psychologist or a psychologist of their preference. We don't need to know what they talk about. We just want to know that they had the appointment, and we get a note saying they made their appointment, and we're good. And what we're hoping to do there is we're hoping to head off issues before they fester. Police officers are pretty type A personalities, haven't done this for 30 years. I'll tell you, a lot of officers won't admit when they have a problem or when they're having stress or when they're having issues at home, PTSD, and we think that this might be a strategy to get them some help without having to put them out front and have them come to us and say, hey. So that's the fourth component. I'm actually really excited about that. I was talking to our human resources today, and they thought it was a great idea. Commander Brunk's heading that up, and we have had, in the last few months, we've had several officers that have gone out, missed time for stress-related, PTSD-related issues. Two of them I've talked to recently both said if we'd had a program like this in place, they think it would help them. It would have done wonders. They actually ended up going to see these same counselors on their own, and they said, we'll be the first ones to stand up and support it because we think it's that important. So our strategies, we're going to implement a training needs assessment plan, and what that is all of our employees, we want them to be trained, we want them to get the latest, greatest information, legally, tactically. We're going to have a plan, and our goal is to have all of our, not only officers, but our professional staff get that training every year. We have cadets. Anybody seen the cadets? They're usually the young kids, 18 to 25, light blue shirts. They make minimum wage, but they are a huge benefit to us, and most of them are youngsters that want to get in law enforcement. So in order to get more recruits, we want to enhance our cadet mentoring program. So we have them meet with our training and our professional standards unit, talk about their goals, talk about how to get to their goals, basically mentor them from being a cadet into the police academy and hopefully as a police officer with our department. Increase statewide police officer standards and training courses held at the Ventura Police Department. It's expensive to send a police officer out of the state or out of the city to attend 40 hours of training. So what we're trying to do is have some of these training courses held here at the Ventura Police Department. It does two things. We don't have to send them off for travel, and usually if we host it, we get some free seats in the class. So we're trying to increase that. Enhance recruitment efforts for sworn and professional staff. 30 years ago when I got hired, it was a lot of the military bases where we recruited. We still do that today, but we're expanding our scope. We're going to colleges, we're going to gyms, athletic centers, women's only athletic centers. We're trying to reach the crowd that we didn't traditionally reach before. Show them what we do, talk about the things that we do, talk about the benefits, invite them for a ride along, and get them on our page and hopefully interested in being a law enforcement officer. Provide technology proficiency training to sworn and professional staff. That's just making sure that all the programs and the technologies we have, our people know how to use it. So part of our training is we'll train on that, make sure they can use it, because we don't want to spend money for something and then they don't use it or use it once a year and they forget how to use it. Maintain post-certified instructors in key training dimensions. That goes directly to hosting classes at our department. It's it's even better if we can have some of our own employees teach the classes and teach not only our officers, but officers from other agencies that come to us. Modernize the department's internet training site. We have an internet site that's internal only, where we can put all of our training information, training bulletins, legal changes. It's just a place, a resource for our officers to go and see what's the latest, greatest with law enforcement and laws. Provide professional staff with opportunities for career development and ongoing forecasts of attrition and succession needs. So, as the chief talked about, we're not only looking for today, we're looking down the road. So we're forecasting people that might be retiring, where we're gonna have needs, and we're talking about that, and we're identifying training needs, development needs, mentoring needs, so that we're ready for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road when we need them to step up and take a more important leadership role. Any questions on team development? I try to go through fast because I know we're taking a lot of time.
Sorry. So how's the diversity in the department in terms of women and minorities, and do you have goals around that?
Yes. So when I became assistant chief 5 years ago, we had 8 female officers. We've doubled that. We have 16. One of the things that we find is some of our normal or traditional recruitment efforts weren't reaching females and minorities like we wanted to. So like one of the things I talked about was going to athletic centers and gyms. There are some female-only ones. We go to those. We send our female officers there to go there and talk about the great things that the job provides them and that the department values them. It's very important to us because we want to reflect the community. I think we've done a really good job with that. As far as losing members, we lost a female because she had a baby and her husband wanted her to be home and be with the kids because it was like the 3rd kid. Nothing we can do about that. We offer them in those situations, hey, is there another position in the department that doesn't cause you to work nights and weekends that we can maybe offer to you? So we try to keep them as well as any employee when something like that happens.
Sorry, we're grabbing all the questions. I just wanted to say, I think it's a great idea to have that mental health check-in. I think especially after 2017 December, I think the whole department probably should have come together to do it. So I think that's excellent.
So we were actually thinking about that. That was on our minds, but it wasn't in our plan. And when we had the community meeting, actually a couple of people mentioned it. Said, hey, have you guys thought it? And we put it in there. It's that important. All right. Chief Corney's on the way up.
Thanks, Darren. Thank you. So I'm going to cover the last 3. I'm going to cover the last 3 goals. I just want to mention, who asked a question about diversity and ethnicity? You go to our website, it's posted. The ethnicity and the gender of our sworn officers and professional staff, I believe.
Yes, not only that, but the performance measures, all the measures we're talking about are posted on our website.
These aren't yet because we haven't, yeah. And we update them once a quarter. And I just also want to comment as one of the 2 people, Darren and I read every background that of somebody we're considering to hire, and page by page, and what I have learned from reading those backgrounds and seeing the performance of officers is diversity is deeper than gender and ethnicity. It's about their life experiences, what they've done, things that have happened to them in life, and we are hiring people that come from times in environments that probably wouldn't have gotten hired back when Darren and I were starting off, and I'm real proud of that, and I think it adds to our diversity. And ethnicity and gender is important, and we have 16, but we have 3 in the academy too. So we're gonna have 19. They're all doing well, so it's great stuff, and we're gonna keep working on that and do it. It'd be great to get close to 50-50 one day, and maybe we'll do that. And it's a good thing. So I'm going to talk about the next 3 goals, and I'll be brief. Dan, what we're going about 8:20? Okay.
We'd like to hear you talk.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's my cutoff time? There's 8:30.
Yeah.
So okay, perfect. It's 8 o'clock for those of you who aren't looking at the clock. So I'll I'll go. So active partnerships, which is really our shared community problem-solving efforts. And policing and partnerships begin with P's I've learned this over my career for a very important reason, because we can't be effective without partnerships. And we're learning that as we evolve and becoming more and more involved. When I was a new officer, all of a sudden this idea of community policing came up, and kind of like a lot of us new officers thought the way that we should do our job anyway, but we're so much deeper in that. Community policing isn't a project now. It is essentially the DNA of effective police departments, and that's how we train people from day one, and they learn that in the academy, and we move forward. So with partnerships, the measurements measuring partnerships is kind of difficult. You're really measuring the results of what you do. Taking head counts at meetings, but that doesn't mean that it's an active partnership. It just means people showed up to hear you talk, or showed up for the free cookies or whatever you're doing. Really it's about what the result of all that is. So one of our biggest problems, you may have noticed with Ventura, is chronic homelessness. It's a real struggle, and it's a struggle for especially all beach communities. So how do we deal effectively with that? Well, we know we're not going to wrest our way out of that, especially with changes in laws and things. It's just there's no effective sanctions. So we need to get with our community, with our resources, other government resources, with community members, with social services, to try and figure out how to address this problem. So one of our measures is, Darren talked about chronic offenders. Chronic offenders are people who have 5 or more offenses in the last 6 months, in the last year, with 1 in the last 6 months that we've arrested them for. Well, that's not all homeless people. There are people who have roofs over their head every night who are part of that problem, and those are our habitual chronic offenders. But a majority of them are homeless. And that causes issues in terms of us being able to help them out of homelessness. So we want to reduce that number of the offenders. We have people who've been arrested 50 times in a year. And how do we reduce that number of those number of people who've been arrested, chronic offenders, 5 or more times in a year? So we look at the big picture and we say, how do we reduce that number? And different tools. Putting them in jail is not going to do it. They're going to get out of jail in a day or two, and then they're going to go out and offend again. So how do we get them to drug treatment? How do we get them to alcohol treatment? How do we help connect them with family members? Those are all things that we do, but we can't do alone. I mentioned about partnerships and policing and problem solving. Really that's the core of policing. We talk about enforcing laws, but really enforcing laws is just a tool of policing. We want to be effective. We have to find other ways to do it, because sanctions on enforcing laws, we're not going to put somebody in jail and throw away the key. It's never been that way. Even though it's less that way now, it's never been an effective way to do business. So we have to work within our community to solve the problem. We talked about our volunteers in policing. Somebody asked about the people with the white shirts who go around. So we had about 45 of those, I think, when we first started, upper 40s. We're down to about 20 now. And we haven't had a volunteer in policing academy, and we've had community academies. So we want to run a volunteer in policing academy, increase that number in the next 3 years by 20%. And then something you may have heard about that our council approved was something that we thought was very important. We looked at the horrific acts of violence in active shooter cases and gun violence going on in communities, and we read articles and we talk about it at our department, and you really focus a lot on response. Okay, we train our officers to be able to respond. We give them the equipment, we give them the training, they'll go in. But how can we stop our officers from having to respond to this? How can we stop this happening from our community? What's the prevention aspect of it? So it's really not a measure, it's a yes or no, but we're on our way to doing it, and it's a little more involved than just the idea of implementing a comprehensive gun violence prevention response program. But it is what it is about. We were provided with council the funding to hire another criminal investigative tech to be the coordinator, and it's about providing prevention and community education along with the response training that we give our officers. So we want to be able to keep our eye on people that have been threats in our community, rather than have it the report, we go out to the call, the person's not a threat at that time, and we wait for the next call on that person. Having a system to track the person, to make sure they're being accessed mental health systems. Maybe if it's a call where we're just not sure and we can't quite take the person on mental health hold, maybe it's about following up with the neighbors and the people who weren't at home at that time. And if you look at, Parkland, Florida, UCSB, the borderline incident, there were government entities involved. but there was no follow-through later on. And I can tell you, the beginning of this school year that just ended, we had an incident day one of school. Anybody remember where a kid had been taken to a mental health facility in Kern County? So he came out, we spent some time with him, but 3 months later, who's checking in up on the kid? The mental health system doesn't do that. You know, it's really up to the person. So we have somebody that's a position that we're bringing on that's gonna help us do that and tie it into everything else. So I talked about some of the strategies, but I want to just cover them quickly. Is with homelessness and dealing with our chronic offenders that are homeless and vagrancy issues. You know, we have a great program in Ventura, unique to Ventura, with our Superior Court as our community intervention court, where we actually, it's not mandatory, but we're able to cajole people who are having chronic homeless problems and criminal vagrancy issues into this court. We work with a public defender, we work with the courts, our city attorney is a big part of it, and we get them into the program, and then we offer them more resources and ways out of their situation. It's effective and it works, but it's not just about that moment in court. Every Tuesday morning at the conference room next to my office, there's over 20 social services members that come throughout private and public throughout the county, and we case manage our most chronic offenders, and we come up with a treatment plan and what beds are available or what can we do with them, and we case manage them, and especially the people that are going to be in community intervention court that day. So being more effective at that and focusing more on that. What we're doing here, of course, making sure our sworn and professional staff are participating in community meetings. Again, not something you measure in terms of, well, how many meetings do we go to? It's about that synergy, that unity that we create by being a part of all this. Continue training our officers on the chronic offender program. It's complicated knowing who's a chronic offender, somebody, the dispatcher being able to look it up. It makes a difference with what we can do with a person criminally sometimes. So it's important that our officers understand it. We're putting that information out there and our officers understand it. Our patrol task force is kind of the head team that handles our homeless stuff, but they're not always around, and at 3 in the morning we want to make sure our officers know how to most effectively deal with one of our most chronic offenders who might be homeless, and realize that who to contact and how to get them to resources or whatever is the most appropriate sanction at the time. Talked about increasing our volunteers. Once a year we want to have a community academy and a volunteer and policing academy. Expand our public-private camera partnership. Somebody asked about public spaces, activating public spaces. Yeah, great, you're right, but they're not always activated. So right now in Ventura, we have about 160 public security cameras throughout our city, in parks, the promenade. We have some of those are at the police station, on the perimeter of the police station, and we have a monitoring station through some funding that we were able to obtain, fortunate to obtain, and we monitor those. Our dispatchers can monitor it. You know, we had a call today on the railroad trestle. They could go right to the camera up at the railroad trestle that we used to watch for graffiti and see there was supposedly a person throwing stuff off the trestle onto the freeway, see if somebody's there, let the officer know what direction they're going, confirm where they're at, what's going on, so we can kind of figure out what our best response would be at the time. And it's an eye to keep an eye on things. We dispatch officers to areas where we see things on the camera that nobody else is seeing. So that expanding that's important. One of our goals, we'd like to continue. We'd love to see it also with private partnership, where if you have a camera that faces out onto your street, you've registered it with us. Not that we want to look at it, but if we have a burglary on your street, we know that you may have a clue for us, and we don't have to go knocking on doors. We know your address is registered, and we can send one of our criminal investigative techs instead of an officer to that house to do some follow-up, ask you to pull the video, and we call that a clue. We may be arresting a bad guy and increasing our clearance rate. We have a very active Ventura Police Community Foundation. Continue to work with them to promote community partnerships. They've done some great things, raised money to buy our officers ballistic rifle vests, and some other things in our community, and host a Heroes Gala once a year, which is sensational for unrecognized heroes in our community that do great things to enhance our community. I talked about the gun violence prevention officer, putting that those people, so we're training the schools and really working in step with our partners on that, working with behavioral health and the patrol task force. Right now there is a behavioral health mental health worker team with our patrol task force is out like 3 days a week, and we're able to deal with mental health crisis. That's showed some promise. We still have to work on making that mental health outreach effective and actually being able to get the person into treatment or whatever more quickly, but unfortunately beds and resources are a challenge. But having that mental health worker is the first step in getting us to better coordinate that. And then finally, we utilize our social media, which Darren talked about. I mean, if you're not on Facebook or Instagram or one of the social media or Nextdoor, please get on it. We use it, and we put a lot of good information out, and I think it's valuable in bringing our community together and preventing crime. One point when Darren was talking about, thefts in neighborhoods and people not reporting it, if you have a theft in your neighborhood, we see the potential for another theft occurring in the next week or two increase exponentially, because criminals talk or they come back, especially if they don't get caught. So if your neighbor's leaving their garage open or their car's unlocked, that's likely going to victimize other people in the neighborhood, because they just walk through and shake door handles to look for an unlocked car, or they look for an open garage. So work together to help us on that. And then finally, we were provided funding to increase our gang violence prevention program. And we have officers, we're in the academy right now to hire, and we can begin to staff that unit in about 6 or 8 months. But what we do with that is it gives us the ability to be in the schools, talking with gang violence prevention, and give us the ability to be out in the field proactively instead of just investigating gang crimes after they happen. Any questions on any of that? I went through it pretty quick.
Well, one thing that comes up on Nextdoor frequently is people will say, well, the fact that we have the county jail here in Ventura, that when people are released from jail or from being charged for something, or they're released from like some mental health treatment, that then they're put on the streets in Ventura, and that's contributes to our homelessness and drug issues. Can you speak to that?
Well, I'll tell you, anecdotally, I don't disagree with you. It kind of makes sense. But we studied that pretty seriously and looked at people who were released and when their next arrest was, and there was really no correlation that showed that. Now, but keep in mind, we're only solving 20% of the property crime. So 80%, we don't know who did it. So it is a problem. It is a challenge for Ventura. Everybody that's booked into jail is released from Ventura at some point in time. Now, many may get rides, but some don't get, some get bus tokens, some are released at midnight. So it's a challenge. We work with the sheriff on that. There are statutory requirements for them releasing people. And if this bail initiative that was passed that's being challenged now goes through, there'll be even more challenges, because there's a very short window that people have to be released on. But we're going to figure it out. And again, it becomes a challenge, another challenge for policing that we and our community that we have to figure out. It is good for us to see that we don't have any direct evidence to that. But anecdotally, I don't disagree. It's a challenge.
You just mentioned something, reminded me, why are people released at midnight?
Statutorily, they're once the new day comes, they have to be released. They can't. They're 26 days. 26 days may end at midnight. When 12:01 becomes the next day. There's processing issues where they bring somebody in at 4 PM. By the time they book them and go through the process, and the people post bail, that's when they get out. When they're eligible to get out, they're released. I'm certainly not saying everybody's released at midnight, but that kind of stuff does happen. The majority of people released get rides, have transportation. The challenge is the people who, especially homeless people, nobody's going to come get them.
Especially
so we work
at
with
midnight.
we work with the jail to try and break those releases, go at different times, and they're cooperative. But the issue is sometimes they're backed up against a statutory requirement, and they have to release them. Mm-hmm. And some of those people we hear about, they may not be crimes, but they'll be disturbing somewhere else, and we'll respond, and we talk to the jail and work that out.
On the manner of chronic homelessness, would you, in your experience, feel that free point-of-service medical service would facilitate homeless people getting the services they need?
certainly it's a great resource to have, and we have a care pod out at the Santa Clara River bottom and there's one-stop center with public health. The care pod, the point of it is we have it where we know there's a big population of homelessness, and driving them to that and having it available to them makes a big difference, and it cuts down on emergency medical calls and trips to the emergency room. So I think that's a tool, as well as might be field drug and alcohol counseling.
Right, and then in regard, similarly to prevent homelessness, something like Medicare for All, where it provides healthcare services to people where they are, when they are, regardless of their ability to pay. And would you be, as a police department, supportive of that?
Well, we're supportive of any tool that helps quality of life and make our community better. The challenge is I think people are homeless for a lot of different reasons, and you have to really get down to what those reasons are. But when you talk about medical care, if it treats drug addiction, that's important. So, and I'm going to talk about that in the next section.
Okay, we'll take one more question, then we'll.
Yeah, I'll jump through these.
I've seen the ambassadors on bicycles, and I was
Correct.
wondering if that's effective. How big is that program, or are you increasing it, or what's the status?
Well, the ambassadors are actually it's through the Downtown Ventura Partners, and it's a program that our council has funded, and they aren't police department employees. They work hand in hand, especially with the patrol task force. They're constantly on the phone with each other, and their eyes and ears out there, and they're hugely effective and much less of a cost of a police officer. Of course, their scope's a little limited, but it's very effective, and it's being there, just helping to be eyes and ears, and it just moves the problem along and helps us identify it. So it's a great partnership, and just an example of why those kind of partnerships are so important. So next I'm going to go get real quick through maintaining safe neighborhoods. And this is, everybody here lives in a neighborhood, and this is really what impacts people. You feel more violated. You drive down the street, you see a crash, and you go, okay, well, that's somebody else's area. But when you have crime in your neighborhood, disorder in your neighborhood, drug dealing in your neighborhood, it turns your world upside down. So focusing on sustaining the quality of life in our neighborhoods is one of our goals, and something that's important to us. So one of the things that we've seen increase is drug use and the drug epidemic across our community. You can, whether it's a proliferation of drugs into the market, and I'm talking cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, not cannabis right now. I'm talking about illegal, illicit narcotic and drugs. It has a cost to our community. Any of you have had a drug dealing in your neighborhood that you think is expected a house? It's terrible, right? It's horrible, right? It's a big problem, and it brings in crime, and it brings in disorder. So how do we address that effectively? Well, we are going to have some the measures to do it, but some of them, I was making sure I was on the right one here, is about us directing resources to trying to deal with people on drugs. Unfortunately, 800 South Victoria, the county jail, is not an effective treatment measure. And it never was, but even less so with everything being reduced to misdemeanor and really no sanctions for drug use. And what we found over time is Ventura has become the #1 city in the county for opiate overdose, for drug overdoses. They're not all opiate, for drug overdose deaths. And so we're working to how can we first of all impact that in our communities, and then we're looking at how we can impact drug deals in our neighborhood and drug sales in our neighborhoods, and we're doing that through the allocation of some resources that we've provided through council, where we're expanding our property crime and our drug team. We can deal with not when we're chasing El Chapo through San Bernardino, but when we're dealing with the drug dealing going on in your neighborhood, and we can respond more appropriately in the property crimes, because property crimes and drug dealings are linked. It's over a third of our arrests every year between property crimes and drug dealing. So we want to reduce the drug-related deaths for the last 3 years compared to the last 3 years. And we measure that. Ventura County Public Health, Drug and Alcohol Prevention measures that, and we'll be able to see the number. And if we reduce that, we think we're reducing the proliferation of drugs in our community as well. Reduce fatal and injury traffic collisions compared to the last 3-year average. So we talked a little bit about people driving with loud exhaust and things like that, but also people driving too fast, distracted driving, things like that. How do we reduce those? It's through enforcement, through public education, things like that, and reducing that's one of our goals. And then I talked briefly about reducing thefts and burglaries in neighborhoods. So when your car gets broken into in your neighborhood, your house gets broken into, that's a real personal violation. It's much closer to home, and those are the crimes that we really want to address. And we've been successful in addressing. I think we had so far this year we have about a 30% reduction, Darren, in residential burglaries, which is great. Thefts from unlocked cars is one of our challenges. If people would lock their cars, those crimes would not occur. And remember, we don't keep 8 tracks and cassettes in our car anymore. We keep iPhones, GPS devices, expensive things that somebody steals and they go get $50 for. They sell it for $50 or more. And that buys a lot of drugs. That buys, opportunity to other crimes. So keeping their cars locked. So how we'll do this, we want to use our beat coordinators. Our corporals on our shifts are all beat coordinators. They work within that beat. You'll see if you go to our website, it has their number and how to contact them and their work days. Focus our street crime resources, which is a team that we have to address drug and property crimes in neighborhoods and public spaces. We arrest about 500 people a month in the city of Ventura, month in and month out. 40% of those arrests, on average, are people who identify themselves as homeless. It's a big number. 30% of that 40% are for drug-related crimes, cases. Where are they getting the drugs? Last I checked, they're not giving them away, right? They're selling them, so they're obtaining the money to do it, property crimes, and then they're buying the drugs, and if you're homeless, where are you buying the drugs? Public spaces. So addressing that's very important, we think, to helping to curb back some of our problems with our chronic homelessness and the problems that go on with that. Just to mention, another 30% of that 40% of our homeless arrests are for failures to appear in court. On what kind of cases do you think? Drug crimes, right? And alcohol things and stuff. They're not going to court. So 60% of our arrests we can work to try and affect if we can reduce substance abuse and dependency. We work with our traffic enforcement to look at where we're seeing our accidents and where we're seeing near miss accidents and making sure we're directing our traffic enforcement there to slow people down. That's not just tickets, it's signage, social media, things we do. We meet with traffic engineering once a month or once a quarter to kind of go over where accidents are and look at how we can better engineer the traffic flow to fix that. Utilize public and private media resources to promote crime prevention, which we've talked about with our social media. We talk about the overdoses. We recently was awarded a grant to give all our officers naloxone, which is Narcan. It sprays in the nostrils, and we've deployed it at least a half dozen times already and certainly saved some people's lives, but also, we're there before the fire department often, so we can get it on board. That doesn't mean the fire department doesn't need to come, because they still need to come treat the person. It's just a temporary measure, but it gets them breathing and helps bring them back from their overdose. Expand our partnerships with the countywide narcotics team. Spending more time understanding what's going on around the county will help us influence local drug issues and connecting. Drug dealers not cross city boundaries. They come from Oxnard, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, Ojai, so working together more with the countywide team. I talked about meeting with our traffic engineering unit and quarterly, and then finally increasing the volunteers and policing work on our focus patrols. So not only do we have officers going to our hot spots, to our high calls for service, high crime areas, but having our volunteers and policing more integrated in that is also one of our goals we think will help us. Any questions on that?
Yes, sir. Chief, what's the policy on people sleeping and living in their cars?
It's the policies, we don't like it. Legally, we struggle. We are in a world right now with some case law that's put us in a tough spot. The Ninth Circuit, it was a case out of Idaho about basically said, unless you have a place, a bed for every homeless person in your community, you can't enforce sleeping in public laws. If it's just merely sleeping in public. Now we have parks that close at dusk. You can't be in a park after dusk, so that works. But if you're in a car and you're illegally parked and you're sleeping, our ordinance that we had before is now void pending the review of this Ninth Circuit case, but I think it already got turned down, didn't it, Darren? So, and it's working and how you define it, but now it doesn't mean we can't contact the people. It's just whether we can take enforcement action. If they're parked on a red curb, if they're, been somewhere more than 72 hours with abandoned vehicle type thing. If they're in a parking lot that says no parking after 3 a.m., we can take enforcement action. But it doesn't mean we can't go check on the people, check their well-being, talk to them, things like that. And what the tough thing is in front of any of your houses tonight, a van could pull up, park, and you're just watching out your window and looks like people are in there, but it's not going anywhere. We'll still go and we'll still contact the people, and hopefully we'll be successful in enticing them to leave. But sleeping in a car has become a real challenge, and potentially even more increasing of a challenge with some potential legislative bills. But what we do is solve problems, and what we work with our community to do is solve problems. So we'll figure it out together.
Related to that, I've heard of some local governments having parking areas that are available.
And we have them in Ventura. We have Safe Sleep. I think we have, Christy, is it 2 or 3 churches right now? 2 churches, and they have people who participate in it, and we certainly would open that up. It's called the Safe Sleep Program. They have to have insurance. They have to kind of register for the program. We know there's a lot more people sleeping in cars across the city than report to our Safe Sleep Program, but our officers, when we get those calls, we contact the people. We try to direct them to the program because it's tied to services. It's tied to some connections that we can help them get that system.
What about mobile homes or motor homes? Are they allowed on the street?
Just as a car, same as a car. Now,
So
if it's a violation of oversized vehicle ordinance, we can work with that. But just merely sleeping in the car. As long as it's not in violation of our oversized vehicle ordinance, they can, which basically says the hours between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., I believe. Yeah, that you can't have it on a public street and parked. So, and it's, again, a thing that's really being litigated and changing, but, living in that is no different than living in a car as far as the law goes for sleeping out of it. LA tried some things to really enforce that, and I don't know how many millions they ended up losing over that. So it's not a friendly environment for dealing with this, and I think our courts, and maybe rightfully so, see this as a social problem. There needs to be some solutions. But the de facto thing for our communities to go 911 or hello police, come check this out. We'll always come check it out. It's just sometimes what we can do is limited.
I'm going to take one more question.
Okay. Yeah, I can get through the next one pretty quick.
Okay.
Mine was just a kudos.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Kudos.
Well, thanks. It's
It literally is a kudos to you guys for being so willing to work with people. Because I had this pie in the sky idea coming from my background, that those of us who would be interested in kind of like doing what you're doing, which would be like having about a group of 10 people that need help, just being on my list, that I would check with them periodically. But I'm happy to know that you guys are working so diligently with people.
Thank you. Thanks. So I want to rip through this here because we have another presentation, but this is finally, it's efficiency and accountability, which is important to us, and it's making sure we're efficient and accountable for what we do in our community and how we deliver our service. We have a car accident problem right now. Not a serious problem in terms of injuries, but we've got police officers with computers, cell phones, and I want you to think about this. Police officers are probably one of the only professions, if not the only one, who gets paid to look for other than exactly where they're going, right? We want our guys looking around and looking in the rearview mirrors and looking for crime and wanted people and things like that. We have a lot of slow speed crashes right now, little fender benders. Darren, how many times did 2 officers run into each other last year at a slow speed? More, at least twice. We're like, oh. And so that costs us money. That costs the city money, but it also has the potential to, if you're going to crash slow, you might crash fast. And we're seeing our accidents slowly increase. So we're going to figure out how we're going to reduce that, and we have some strategies to do that, which, training and education with our officers, and we discipline officers every time they get in a crash. There's no free rides, and you're right, they are paid not to look where they're going all the time, but it doesn't matter. If it's your fault, it's your fault, and it's progressive discipline from the first one on. So we want to reduce that 10% compared to the last 3 years, which hopefully won't be too hard. Reduce personnel complaints compared to the average 3 years ago. Body-worn video has helped us reduce personnel complaints immensely already, because the camera works two ways, and the officers, I think, behavior has certainly improved, but by the same token, people know they're on camera. Their behavior improves. And we solve a lot of personnel complaints with a one phone call and inviting the complainant to come watch the video that we just viewed, and the claim ends. But yet we don't do it for that reason. We do it so we're better at what we do. And so we want to continue to work with those things. Attain 100% use of force. The use of force is very important to us, and doing that right. And we want to make sure 100% of the time we're within department policy. We train our officers on use of force skills and philosophies every 6 months. They have to pass a written and a physical skills test. Because what does a police officer do every day? Puts their hands on people. Every day they're arresting people, they're detaining people, they're cajoling people over to stand somewhere else. So we have to be prepared to use that force reasonably and to do it in a way that doesn't create an escalation of force. And then finally, arrive at priority 2 and 3 calls within 10 and 20 minutes respectively. Now, Darren talked in crime control about emergency calls and in-progress calls. And we're not talking about an in-progress call where somebody's jaywalking for that. We're talking about a burglary in progress, some kind of serious crime going on, or a car accident, some emergency call where somebody needs help, a violent fight in progress, not just somebody yelling. Somebody yelling isn't a priority 1 call. It's a priority 2 call or priority 3 call, depending on, it's subjective to dispatchers. We've had to figure out how to, the amount of homeless calls that we have is overwhelming, and homeless people disturbing calls, mental health people disturbing calls, it's overwhelming. And how do we reprioritize things and go to the ones that matter? And Darren mentioned the yogurt shop. It's something we talk about. We spent some time looking at our calls and seeing that sometimes we take 30 minutes to even dispatch an officer going to a call of somebody screaming in front of a yogurt shop where 2 18-year-olds are working. And that's because we're on a report call, taking a burglary report. And it's not a priority 1 call. The person's just out there, they're yelling, they're acting weird, it's a little scary. We want to get there within 10 minutes. We think that's more appropriate. So figuring out strategies to recalculate how we respond to these calls, and then sticking to them and making them part of our culture is important to us. And then, of course, there are calls we've got to prioritize. We can't make anything 1 and 2, so deciding what's 3 and appropriately reviewing those every month and making sure we're doing that correctly, and our dispatchers and our officers are getting there is an important part of that. So I talked about the steps we're going to do for driving. I'll be brief here. Our use of force testing I talked about. Utilize technology to consolidate and improve the way we're doing our use of force complaint tracking. That we're making sure we're capturing everything and that we're evaluating it fully. And we talked about, response time review and tactical communications as part of what we do to make our ethical decision-making stronger and making sure our officers are doing the right thing for the right reasons. So that's efficiency and accountability. And that's a big one. That's what you all want. And that's the thing that keeps you out of the news and it for bad things. And keeps the public trust.
This has been really great, and it's great to be able to kind of see first the 3-year strategy plan, for the community. We'd like to have you back another time where you can talk more off, of other things. But I'm really glad we were able to do all this tonight.
We appreciate being here, and Darren and I come and represent this department, but believe me, we are so proud of the men and women that are out there every day doing the work. And we hear compliments, and we know there's a ton of community support, and our officers know that. And it's important to them, and it's important to all of us to have the kind of police force that we have now and that we're building together. So I encourage you to stay involved, participate. Don't be afraid to call us when you need us. Don't worry that you're bothering us, because that's for us to figure out. We'll get it all done. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, next up we have, thank you, Chief. That was really good. Thank you, Darren. Ben Rocca is here from to show us some plans, some conceptual plans for a development project over at 2400 Channel Drive. And this is a property that was looked to see doing some development quite a few years back, and I think the recession hit amongst other things. So why don't you come on up, Ben, and you can go ahead and give a little presentation, and then we'll give them a little input. So we'll give them about 10 minutes at most to do that, and then time for a few questions before we adjourn this evening.
Thank you, Dan. By means of introduction, my name is Ben Rocca. My company is Rocca Development. I'm here on extension of Warmington Homes. They are here this evening as well. And we're going to discuss the property address at 2400 Channel Drive. And it's not going to be 10 minutes. Okay. It'll be brief. First, I'd like to thank you, Dan, for inviting us here this evening. Thank you to the council. We're honored and privileged to be here this evening to meet you all folks. Really the purpose, as Bill here gets set up with the PowerPoint, we would like to just kind of take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. Who is Warmington Homes? What types of projects have they developed across the state, both Northern and Southern California? And then we can also discuss the property itself, the conceptual proposal. When we talk about conceptual plan here tonight, it's so conceptual that we don't have anything really to discuss other than we're here to kind of garner your feedback, really. Share with you that the intentions are to propose a residential project, new development, attached product, 2-story, but really we're in the very early stages of design, and we want to, again, collect your feedback, engage with the community. We're meeting with the city. We're doing due diligence right now. We're trying to figure out exactly what is allowed under the existing general plan, which we know is medium residential, and how do we get compatible with the surrounding land uses being residential as well. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Jay Deckard with Warmington Residential. And I'll let him share with you folks a little bit more about the company and its history.
Thank you. I'm not a PowerPoint person, but Bill may move this thing along. But prior to starting, I want to go back and just say hi. My name's Jay Deckard with Warmington. We're a home builder, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what we do. We build houses. We like to think we build neighborhoods. We like to be a part of a community. So I think tonight's meeting was good for us because I keep calling it a ride, but the Bike Ventura, I signed up for the email so I can see what they're doing on a regular basis. I signed up for the email for this group as well. But we like being part of the community. I can't follow, obviously, the chief and his staff. They did a great presentation. They protect all of us, day in and day out. I don't live in Ventura, but I'm up here quite a bit. But I think it was good for those two to come before us because we want to be part of the community. And as Ben said a moment ago, there is no plan at the moment. We do want to build residential homes. They'll probably be attached. But what we want to do is be part of the community. So our start is we don't have a drawing. We don't have a plan. Yes, we've doodled some things out, but we like input. So this was our first step. We haven't met with the city yet. I think we had one introductory meeting with a planner who wouldn't be a planner for this project, I think specifically. And then we would do a community-wide outreach as well. So that's really our purpose for tonight, is to do that, leave here maybe with some thoughts. Ben will be the point person for us from a contact standpoint. If you want to email him, he'll gladly give you a card and a contact. I'm available at any point in time as well. Get some input. We hope to come back maybe in September. When you're back again, show you another plan. We'll have had more input, again, as I said, from a community outreach standpoint. But that's really the purpose tonight, just to say hi. And I think it was good the way it started out. So if you want to go through this PowerPoint, you're up there with Warmington. Company started in 1926. I've been in and involved in and around Warmington since 1983. I've left, done other things, and been back for about the last 10 years. So it's a privately held company. I can't follow yours, I'll move along with it. And we pride ourselves on being a privately held company. It's a family company. It's 4th generation right now. And again, we are a home builder. Some days we're not proud of that because of just things that go on in life, but for the most part, we are very proud of it from the standpoint of we want to build communities. People need a place to live. Things have changed. I remember when we were building at one point in time 10,000 square foot lots. Then it went to 7,200s and 6, 5s, and 4s. I think right now we're building on 2,500 square foot lots, and that's probably a big lot. And as you know, 2,500 square feet is probably half this room, maybe pretty close to that, somewhere in there. It might be the same size as this room, but they're very small. We have a group of different companies that are up there, not to go through all of those. That part there I like the most, and I'm going to age myself a little bit here. When I started a long time ago, when the newspaper was relevant, people would look in the classifieds, and if you owned a Warmington home, it probably brought more value from a name recognition standpoint. And I still hold that true in my heart today. And I want to believe that. Now it's on social media or it's something else, but I think there is a value to our name. And what we've seen over the last, or what I've seen personally, over the last probably 5, 6 years, as I said earlier about the lots, everything's got smaller and smaller. The property at 2400 Channel Drive is kind of one of those. You want to look at that and say, what can you do here that's going to be good for the community? And I want to be clear, we're not trying to build something that has a railroad track behind it, if you're familiar with the property, that excludes the community. We see it with front doors along Channel Drive and interacting with the neighborhood right across the street. So we see it integrating into the whole community. This is a sample of a few of our projects. That's one in Dublin, Glassell Park, one in South Orange County, and then the Glen. The two that are the Glassell Park and the Glen, they're very similar to the property here. And they were properties that are, at that point, were vacant. The one now isn't vacant. It has different companies that are on it, but they were infill. And we were able to successfully go into those, build a 3-story, in that case, attached product, and been able to move people in. And it's worked out well for the communities and well for us also. Ventura, we used to have a presence in, probably now 10 years ago. In the last year, we've bought and started a community in Carpinteria, which we have our models under construction right now. So our hope is to be back in Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, and over the next year or two, we think we'll be able to add some properties to that as well. This is the property that we're looking at the moment.
Just that one building, basically?
No. Let's go to the overview here. Do you have the aerial of it, Bill? That's the property right there. What's that?
So seaward to the west, railroad to the south.
That's
seaward.
The far left. I call it the orange juice plant. Is it a lemon packing plant? Okay. Isaiah.
Correct. That's seaward.
So from a
You guys, we got to get you on mic if you're going to ask a
So,
question.
yeah, let's just open up to questions.
Hold on to the
right
questions for a few minutes.
I think we're ready to take questions if you'd like.
You are?
Sure, why not?
Great. Did you have a question?
Traffic on Seaward, how will they divert the traffic from that project? Will it go back Channel Drive or go down Seaward for the freeway? Or?
I've been there dozens of times. I mean, obviously we'd have a traffic engineer that would come in and analyze it, but you go back, and I don't know the street names well enough, where the signal is. What street is it? Ocean? And then that takes you back to Seaward. So you'd have to go through the neighborhoods to go back out. I believe, I don't know what the little, let me find here if I can point it out. The street up there that goes back down, that's for coming in only, so you have to go back through the neighborhoods to get back out.
What's a ballpark number of units are you looking at? How many units?
50 to 70? If I was guessing somewhere in that range. Correct. And they would be attached, two-story, in clusters of probably 4 to 6 units in a building to keep open space and between the buildings.
The project 10 years ago, what took them off the rails with the neighborhood was the 3rd story.
Okay.
And they only had one about every 3rd building, but that, people were blowing their tops over that.
Excuse me, is that the lemon packing back, or is that the storage? Okay, that's the lemon factory. I'm asking him, or you? Do you?
Yes.
You know.
That is.
The lemon packing plant is on the other side of the tracks, and that's the storage area.
That's where they have
On, actually on channel.
where the vehicles are. Where a lot of people are storing the motorhomes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen Woods.
What's the eastern street that boundaries it?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
What's the street on the east? like?
Oh, it's Sandro.
No. I know, but what's the closest street?
So it goes Seaward, Arcade, Evergreen, Howard, Jones,
Right, Seaward's up over there, railroad tracks obviously, and then Channel Drive. That's in front of it. I get it, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. Can you pull it up?
This one's Arcade, right? That's Arcade. And then this one is.
It's Evergreen, then Arcade, and then Howard.
And then Howard.
Thank you.
It doesn't show Howard on there. Oh, it does over there, yeah. No, I mean, it doesn't show. Oh, yeah, it doesn't show that one.
The land is arcade now.
No, it's not.
Oh.
Okay, quick question. First off, my friend that has a trailer there is going to be really disappointed. So what do you think the timeline is? 2 to 4 years or for a project like this?
I hope it's not 4 years. I would like to think that it could be 2 years, but Ventura's a challenge, so I would say 2+ years.
Okay, and then also one other question, and I think Christy will attest to this one. If you have any chance, can you, or any poll with Union Pacific, can you see about a pedestrian crossing that's somewhere in that area to connect? I think they have a thing where they say they can only have so many crossings, but honestly, if there could be a little pedestrian crossing, I think it would be invaluable to that project.
We have no poll with them, but we know they're on the list of somebody that we need to contact and figure out. I've sat at the end of that cul-de-sac there and watched the people that walk across there, and yeah. Right. I've been there and seen that, and we understand the issue.
How many homes are you planning on building in that area?
The answer I gave to the gentleman back there, we don't know exactly, but 50 to 70 is a range of homes that you could put on that property.
And is this the only property in Midtown that you're looking at?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank
If you know of any other property, we'll look at it, but that's the only one we're looking at right now.
I'm wondering about the one where the Grace Church used to be.
No,
They're building four lots there.
no.
And it needs to be groomed because it looks like hell right now.
All right, I think if you guys can hang out after the meeting and answer more questions.
Okay.
I think, because it's getting close to 9 o'clock, and we try to keep it under 2 hours. More like
Thank you
an hour
very
and a half.
much.
Thank you. And I did want to acknowledge our Councilwoman Christy Weir that is here all evening with us this evening. We're not going to do all our committee reports. Just to remind you that we have our Food Truck Friday is a week from tomorrow at the Midtown Mall. And please come out because that's how we pay for getting a lot of things done in our community. So, Greg, do you have any other questions or about food truck or information on food truck? Vendo 81's the band.
And we have vitamin blood services.
Oh, yeah,
We're going to be doing blood donations.
Yeah, we will have the blood mobile there, so that'll be nice too. You can walk up as well. All right, any other announcements from anybody here about something coming up? Public announcements? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Oh yeah, thank you. No, we're not meeting in August. We'll be at the fair, but we'll meet again in September.